Alright, so for people who are not so interested in fiction, this week's genre is going to be of interest to you because we're talking about informational texts, which are a type of nonfiction.
My favorite, generally. Alright, what is an informational text? A subgenre of nonfiction writing. It should inform the readers about a specific topic, written in a way that allows the reader to easily find the key information and understand the main topic. So basically it's stuff that's written so it's really easy to read.
And it teaches you information.
And it teaches you information. It's good.
So, talking about how an informational text is organized or laid out, all of these rules don't necessarily apply, but you might find some of these common features. Authors might provide headers over certain sections, like I'm sure you've noticed in your textbooks that there are headers or headings that kind of divide the information logically for you. They might bold or italicize important vocabulary so that it sticks out. Authors might use visual representations with captions, and visual representations is just a term for pictures, tables, diagrams, graphs, and charts, like the one over to the side, which says, "Things Meatloaf would do for love." Anything or that?
I would do anything for love, but I won't
do anything
do
for love, but I won't do that. That was our horrible rendition. Also, authors might provide a table of contents or a glossary to assist readers in finding the information easier. These are not features that you would typically find in a fictional text.
Man, this almost sounds like we're talking about like textbooks or magazines or something along those lines.
No.
Alright, so other elements of informational text. No characters. For the most part.
Because there's not a plot.
It's not a story, but they will talk about people sometimes.
And it's debatable whether or not biographies and autobiographies and memoirs fit into this category. I would say that those are definitely nonfiction, but I don't know if I would necessarily classify them as informational texts.
Might contain glossaries for specialized vocabulary or embedded definitions. So in the writing, they might have the definition in the sentence or off to the side, so it's real easy to find.
Down in a footnote, like in our literature book.
Oh, that's craziness. They do not tell a story, and they're easy to find a topic of interest.
So even if you don't like nonfiction per se, everybody has interests, and so you would enjoy reading an informational text about something that interests you. So what an informational text is not. It is not a narrative or a text with characters. It's not a book of directions, and it's not, for example, a Yo Mama joke book, okay? Because even though those are definitely texts, they're not things that are going to teach you information. So if those are not informational texts, what are some examples of informational texts?
All right, newspaper article. So, man needs underwear to beat breathalyzer. Do not try this. It doesn't work. But this is an actual article from a newspaper. It covers specific facts and details, and it puts information out. We also have the header where the title tells us what it is. We've got the byline, tells us the author. Easy to read.
But a newspaper is published on a pretty much daily basis, okay? And the purpose of a newspaper is to teach you information about current events mostly. So that's what a newspaper is good for.
You mean they make you a more interesting person?
They do. Okay, so a second type of informational text is a magazine article. So this is an example of an article from Time magazine about the science of appetite, with kind of an interesting picture in it. But magazine articles, even though they are published on, let's say, a monthly or a quarterly basis, less frequently than newspapers, they still teach you information, but it's not necessarily always about current events. Magazine articles just pick topics of interest for the people who buy them. For example, like 17 magazine, their information would be about what a 17-year-old girl would enjoy reading about. Whereas, let's say,
Thrasher
I've never heard of that
have it's a skateboarding magazine that would have topics about like latest skating competitions, or something like Men's Health, which is probably going to have something about some kind of diet and some great ab workout and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So then we have scholarly journals. Scholarly journals are often found in databases, and they are published on either a monthly or a quarterly basis. They're kind of like magazines, only a lot more boring, but they are also more credible than magazines and newspapers because it's usually published by people who are in master's programs or doctoral programs or who have a professional degree in a certain field, and then they do research on theory or, for example, a teacher might do research in a classroom and then publish their research in one of these scholarly journals. So this is a really good place to go if you need information for a research paper.
All right.
So then we have encyclopedia articles, which a lot of times in today's world, encyclopedias are online in a database, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you can also have this antiquated thing called a book that is an encyclopedia. Like when I was growing up, we had 26 encyclopedias or 24 or something like that. It was all one set, and each one of those books was over a letter in the alphabet. Or if it was a letter that didn't have many topics on it, it would be a couple different letters in one encyclopedia. But an encyclopedia is a book or a set of books giving information on subjects, usually in alphabetical arrangement.
So one book's going to have the entire book will be about one letter. If you ever watch the TV show Friends, they talk about Mount Vesuvius and different types of V words like vectors and a whole bunch of other stuff.
So encyclopedias are good for historical topics, but they're not necessarily good sources to go for current controversial information.
Mrs. Cruz here. Let me just straighten out this hat right there. Okay. Now, this is what you would call a textbook, and if you open it up, it has all different sets of non-fiction information that helps you know how to write papers. You could do creative papers. You could do cause and effect papers. You could do persuasive papers. You could do any kind of papers.
All right, textbooks. Hopefully you all know what they are. Hopefully you know where your textbooks are. But basically they cover any type of topic from, we have science, we have some foreign language.
Spanish, it looks like. Buen viaje. Have a good trip.
Word.
Maybe.
Yeah. Literature, algebra, and then Creating America. So each of those books covers its own little topic, and they're pretty much all going to be broke down the same way. They're going to have headers and subheaders and different topics listed with vocab.
You all know what a textbook is.
You probably have one in your locker.
Or two. Alright, so a consumer document is something that you might be less familiar with. The definition of consumer document is paperwork given to buyers, users, or the general public in order to specify agreements, rights, and responsibilities. So the picture here is of a mortgage loan application. So that's an example of a consumer document because if you're buying a house, you would have to sign a mortgage, which would then hold you responsible for paying for the house that you're buying.
You could also think about when you get ready to buy your first car, there's going to be loan or paperwork that you're going to have to fill out for that loan as well. Let's see your other consumer documents. Every time you you get a new cell phone, you're signing that contract. That's a consumer document as well.
And credit card statements are consumer documents.
Devoluciones. Oh, that's French. Returns. Oh, this is totally a consumer document because it tells me what I need to do to return stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. I get this. So I'm going to return this hat because it's just a little bit too big. Do you see this, Bill? How wide that is? And it makes my hair staticky.
Public documents are going to be a little bit different.
The definition of public document is a paper of public importance or interest published by either local, state, or national government agencies.
So these are going to be types of documents that the government puts out that anybody has access to. And one of the reasons they're different than a consumer document, like if you fill out a mortgage or you fill out the paperwork for that loan, all that information is private. The company that you're giving it to is going to keep it private. They're not going to share it. Public documents, on the other hand, are for everybody to read. So this is like
the Constitution.
The mental health, the report of the Surgeon General, your driver's ed information that you get to earn your license, arrest records, they publish those. So that type of stuff is public documents available for everybody.
Information about vaccinations that the government might publish about number of peoples who have come down with measles and stuff like that.
Yeah, this isn't as crazy as Miss Cruz, but this is what we would call a Public Document Act. It is Illinois General Assembly. This is School Health Center Act, which means it's a law, and anybody can come read this and figure out that asthma and oral health problems are two of the leading causes of absenteeism among Illinois elementary and secondary school students. Awesome.
Yo, Cruzy Boozy here with some periodicals. Get up in your magazines. Now remember, magazines are periodicals. Yo.
Periodicals. This is my favorite probably because I love reading magazines. I could sit and go through about 90% of those there.
But periodicals are not just magazines. Also, keep in mind it is typically 3 different things we've already talked about. Magazines, newspapers, and scholarly journals.
And one thing with periodicals, there's also one place where they're pretty easy to find if you need to, and that would be the library. So check it out. Go visit it sometime.
Booyah. Alright, so there are 4 major categories of informational texts as the Common Core standards lay out. So the first category is literary nonfiction, which would be personal essays, speeches, opinion pieces, essays about art or literature, biographies, memoirs, journalism, and historical, scientific, technical, or economic accounts, including digital sources that are written for a broad audience. Okay, and so this is where I say some people might classify biographies, memoirs, and that type of thing as informational text, although usually if it has a storyline, it's not considered informational.
Alright, expository text. Utilize various text structures such as description, cause and effect, comparison and contrast, problem and solution, and question and answer.
Which sounds a lot like different formats for essays you might write in school, in which you should be teaching your audience something. Okay, the third category of informational text is argument or persuasion text, which you guys will be writing this type of essay soon. For this particular type, you provide evidence with the intent of influencing the beliefs or actions of the target audience. So, for example, you might try to persuade your audience that homework is a pain and unnecessary and unbeneficial.
And the last one here is procedural text. This is provide step-by-step guidelines that describe how to complete a task. They often include a materials needed section and graphics that illustrate the process. 3 things pop in my mind here. 1, if you ever work at McDonald's or some fast food restaurant, a lot of times they will have a step-by-step, this is how you make a hamburger. Another one, if you ever see the CPR posters up, they usually show a step-by-step of if somebody's choking, then you do this step, then this step, then this step. And finally, the military is probably one of the best at this because they have a step-by-step procedure on how to do every single thing that you do during the day. They have how to tie your boots, how to shave, how to do all that stuff with a step-by-step instruction.
You might also see these at the gym. If you don't know how to use the medicine ball or the Bosu ball correctly, they will give you pictures and teach you how to use it.
Now, this is what you would call a procedural text. Because this is a subfolder. You see where that says subfolder? Subfolder. Sub. So if I'm a sub, I walk into the room and I pick up the procedural binder and I open it up and I say, okay class, first I'm going to take attendance because number 1 says take attendance. Now, second, we are going to pass out papers, and third, we're going to watch a video because that's apparently all teachers have subs do. So that's the procedural binder for Mr. Childs.
Alright, so where can I find credible informational text? 1. In a database, which we have at the library. We even have CQ Researcher there. Aren't we fancy? Alright, it is a structured set of data held in the computer, especially one that is accessible in various ways.
So we actually have CQ Researcher, Points of View, and ERIC through the library's databases, and that's on the East Peoria school website. And the school pays lots and lots and lots of money for those every year, so we need to use them.
And you will not, basically your teacher is going to accept it as being a credible source if it comes from one of those 3.
Yeah, because people are paid to filter those for credible information, but they are paid for by schools, and you do need to know that because they're expensive, you need a username and a password to log in when you're accessing those remotely. In other words, when you're at the school, you can log in, no problem, but if you're at home or anywhere else, you have to have the username and password. So why might you need these informational texts? Well, for our purposes, you have to have them to write research papers. But also, if you're not reading them, you're not an informed citizen. You're just somebody who's living in a science fiction, fantasy, historical fiction world, and you're not up to date with what's really going on. You can learn from informational texts. You can also impress your future spouse with random knowledge. And you can exercise your brain, which makes you smarter. Read. Just do it.